As you all know, we have a ridiculous amount of homework this weekend, which is why I'm taking this time now to do a video. It's related to the homework though, because of the research essay. You are all probably already aware that my topic is human cloning, and I'm immensely fascinated by it, and also immensely confused as to what I'm going to actually say in the essay. So I've made this video to sort of make up my mind. Human cloning. Everything went apeshit in the 90s when somebody cloned a sheep named Dolly. This was not the first instance of cloning. What it was the first instance of mammalian cloning. What it was the first instance of nuclear cell transfer from an adult somatic cell. A somatic cell being a body cell instead of a sex cell. And nuclear transfer cloning being the process of taking a cell, removing the nucleus from it, and taking a nucleus from another cell and putting it in that cell so that it grows like the nucleus from the other cell. This was difficult because adult somatic cells are already specialized to whatever the purpose of their original nucleus told them to do. So you can't make an embryo from an arm cell because it grows arms. Embryo cells are totipotent. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, which means that they have total potential. They can be anything, which is why they are useful for cloning and research and replacing cancer with cells that work. Scientists who made Dolly made totipotent cells by putting the denucleated cell, the one that they put the nucleus into, in a solution without nutrients for a few days so that all the genes turned off. This is why identical twins are more identical than clones. Because with clones, you take nuclear DNA and match it with other chromosomal DNA, and the nuclear DNA is identical, but the chromosomal DNA is unique every time. With identical twins, my cat is doing things. Identical twins, the DNA and the chromosomal DNA are the same twice, or with quadruplets 4 times, and etc. Because of all of the first with Dolly, the media went crazy. They thought we'd be cloning monkeys next year. Apparently monkeys are the logical progression from sheep, and humans the next. This would of course change everything we know about humanity. Is the lighting changing? Is the sun setting? What's happening? Everything got orange. There's lots of arguments about whether a clone would be a person in their own right. After all of their genetic material belongs to their clonee, or the person they were cloned from. And would the knowledge of the fact that they're a clone be damaging to them psychologically? And why would anybody even want a clone? Of course, a clone wouldn't be like their clonee. For one, because the mitochondrial DNA is different, and for two, because genotype and phenotype are not the same thing. That is to say, your genes say what your body looks like and not how you behave. I mean, your experiences define you. One of the articles I read about cloning made the point to say that you could put identical twins in the same room and raise them there from birth, and one would walk around clockwise and the other counterclockwise, and they would have completely different experiences and be completely different people. I don't think we even know how personalities work. Things happen and then we just react. One of the most obvious reasons for cloning is to help infertile and same-sex couples reproduce biologically. And of course therapeutic cloning for medical research and transplantation and things, but that isn't as interesting, so I'm not going to talk about it. But there's no reason why adoption or artificial insemination wouldn't give the same levels of fulfillment to these couples as cloning would, because family units are so much more than biology. Which is also a reason why one of the arguments from the book I read was completely ridiculous. The person was all, what if the clone falls in love with the clonee, their mother's husband, or feels a more familiar bond with their grandparents, who would be their biological parents? And I was like, you are ridiculous. Then there's the really interesting debate about how society wouldn't understand about genotype and phenotype. They would let the achievements or downfalls of the clonee hang over the clone's head for his or her whole life. They would let the life of the clonee dictate the way that they parent their kid, instead of treating him or her like the blank slate they are. And then there's the issue of the people that would want to engineer their children. Or clone celebrities. This could lead to bad parenting, eugenics, or even some really dark and freaky mess with the celebrities that I just thought about, and I really wish I hadn't. Eugenics is the practice of trying to perfect humanity by weeding out those with undesirable traits, usually by forced sterilization or even murder. Common eugenicists include the Spartans and Hitler. Of course, the bad parenting, and even the really creepy stuff I wish I hadn't thought of, could be filtered out through education of genotype versus phenotype thinking. But there's a very valid argument against human reproductive cloning that because it could possibly lead to eugenics, it shouldn't even be attempted. Eugenics is serious and terrifying shit, guys. And then, of course, the issue of safety. When Dolly was cloned, the scientists started out with about 400 different cells and only got about 270 successful nuclear transplants. and only one sheep was born. That was Dolly. And as far as I know, not much research has been done to improve the safety in the field, since human cloning is illegal and only marginally ethical. To clone a person would require around 50 women to get pregnant and possibly give birth, with a high rate of miscarriage and implantation failure. And then there's also cloning through embryo splitting, or twinning. This is completely legal and happens when scientists take an early embryo and split it into two. Of course, most twinning does happen naturally, as I'm sure a procedure like this one is ridiculously expensive. Most split embryos are born at the same time, with the result of identical twins. I believe saving the split embryo is illegal. However, if one were to save the embryo, I believe many of the debates about reproductive nuclear transfer cloning would apply. If the second embryo/clone were born at a later date, would the parents hold the achievements of the first over the later ones? Is it ethical to postpone the beginning of this twin's life? Would the split embryo clones feel the loss of the connection that identical twins born at the same time sometimes have? Would they still have this connection despite the age gap? What if the parents postpone the split embryo clone's life just in case their first child became chronically ill? That's a debate in reproductive cloning and in the case of children conceived sexually to save their sibling's life. What if the parents never decided to give birth to the second split embryo, but decided it was an important thing to tell their first kid? And what if that twin decided that they wanted to bring that life into existence? Perhaps the most interesting question here is the fact that I'm having so much trouble referring to the genetically identical offspring produced by embryo splitting as clones when I apply the term so easily to those produced by nuclear transfer. Do I subconsciously believe that these humans produced sexually are more human than those produced from somatic cells? Or have I just made nuclear transfer my default definition of cloning, even though I know that it includes both nuclear transfer and embryo splitting? These are questions. I am Kayla, and in other news, there's a company in California called Organova working to 3D print their first liver this year. Link in the description.